This woman called 911 7 times in just 3 hours because of the pond on my ranch. She insisted it was a secretly built swimming pool violating HOA rules and even screamed at officers that it was dangerous for children. But what Karen didn't know was this. The pond was part of a classified military training facility that had been operating on my property since my grandfather's time. She hired private investigators, brought fake inspectors, and even filed lawsuits demanding I demolish the entire, illegal structure. But her obsession accidentally triggered a federal investigation that would expose decades of secrets and land her in way more trouble than she ever imagined. Before you watch complete story, comment down from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I should have known Monday was going to be a disaster when I woke up to the sound of someone testing my pond water at 6 a.m. Through my bedroom window, I could see a woman in a bright yellow safety vest crouched by the water's edge, dipping some kind of electronic device into my pond like she was conducting a scientific experiment. Standing next to her was a man in a rumpled suit holding a clipboard and looking around nervously like he expected to be arrested at any moment. This was my first introduction to Linda Morrison, though she'd later insist everyone call her Karen, and her so-called environmental consultant. I threw on yesterday's jeans and grabbed my coffee mug, then headed outside to figure out what the hell these people were doing on my property at dawn. "Excuse me," I called out as I approached them, "but you're trespassing on private land." The woman looked up from her device and I got my first real look at Linda Morrison. She was probably in her early 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair that screamed, "I demand to speak to managers," and the kind of determined expression that suggested she'd found her life's mission in my backyard. "Mr. Williams," she said, standing up and smoothing down her safety vest like she was conducting official business, "I'm Linda Morrison, president of the Pine Valley HOA, and this is my environmental specialist, Dr. Gerald Foster." The man in the suit stepped forward and extended a business card that looked like it had been printed at a gas station. Something about his nervous energy told me this guy wasn't exactly the environmental expert Linda was trying to make him out to be. "We're here regarding a serious violation of community safety standards," Linda continued, gesturing toward my pond like it was a toxic waste dump. "This unauthorized recreational water facility poses significant health and safety risks to our neighborhood." I stared at her for a moment, then looked at my pond, then back at her. "Ma'am, that's not a recreational facility. That's a ranch pond. It's been here since before this neighborhood existed." Linda pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through what appeared to be a professional presentation complete with charts, graphs, and aerial photos. "Mr. Williams, I've done extensive research on your property. This structure was clearly built recently as an unpermitted swimming pool designed to circumvent HOA regulations regarding recreational water features." She showed me aerial photos that looked like they'd been taken by a drone, with arrows and measurements marking every detail of my pond. The level of surveillance was honestly impressive and more than a little creepy. "How exactly did you get all this information?" I asked. But Linda was already moving to the next phase of her presentation. She pulled out her electronic testing device, which looked suspiciously like something you'd buy at a pool supply store, and announced the results of her analysis. "Furthermore, my preliminary testing indicates chemical levels consistent with treated swimming pool water, not natural pond water. The pH level is 7.4, which is optimal for human recreation but completely unnatural for a livestock pond." Dr. Foster nodded along like he understood the significance, though something told me his expertise was probably limited to whatever crash course Linda had given him in the car. "This is ridiculous," I said. "That pond has been here for 60 years. My grandfather built it for cattle, and I've been maintaining it since I inherited this property." Linda's expression shifted from professional courtesy to barely contained fury. "Mr. Williams, this is not a laughing matter. I've documented multiple violations of community standards, safety codes, and environmental regulations. You have 72 hours to begin removal of this unauthorized facility or face legal action." She handed me a thick folder containing what appeared to be official documents, though I noticed they were printed on regular copy paper instead of legal letterhead. "And if I refuse?" I asked, genuinely curious about how far she was planning to take this. Linda's smile returned, but this time it had a predatory edge. "Then I'll be forced to contact the appropriate authorities about this illegal construction project." What I didn't know at the time was that Linda had already started making those calls. Over the next 3 hours she would dial 9119 separate times, each call becoming more frantic and dramatic than the last. The first call came while she was still standing in my driveway. 911, what's your emergency? This is Linda Morrison at 847 Ranch Road. I need to report an illegal swimming pool that's being operated without permits. The property owner is refusing to cooperate with safety inspections. I could hear the dispatcher trying to understand why this was an emergency requiring immediate police response, but Linda insisted that unpermitted recreational facilities posed immediate public safety risks. The second call came 20 minutes later when the first responding officer explained that civil property disputes weren't really a police matter. 911, what's your emergency? This is Linda Morrison again. The situation at 847 Ranch Road has escalated. The property owner is operating a dangerous water facility without safety barriers. Children could be at risk. By the third call, Linda was claiming that I had threatened her when she tried to conduct legitimate community safety inspections. 911, what's your emergency? Linda Morrison, 847 Ranch Road. The property owner has become hostile and threatening toward community officials. I need police protection while conducting required safety evaluations. The fourth call introduced allegations of environmental damage. 911, what's your emergency? Linda Morrison reporting environmental contamination at 847 Ranch Road. Illegal pool chemicals are being dumped into groundwater. This could affect the entire neighborhood's water supply. By the fifth call, she was claiming the pond was attracting dangerous wildlife. 911, what's your emergency? Linda Morrison, 847 Ranch Road. The illegal water structure is creating a breeding ground for mosquitoes and attracting snakes. This is a public health emergency. The sixth call escalated to claims about property values and community welfare. 911, what's your emergency? Linda Morrison reporting a property that's negatively impacting community safety and home values. The owner is operating an illegal business using unpermitted recreational facilities. The seventh call introduced concerns about zoning violations. 911, what's your emergency? Linda Morrison, 847 Ranch Road. Commercial recreational activities are being conducted in a residential zone without proper permits or insurance coverage. The eighth call suggested I was running some kind of illegal operation. 911, what's your emergency? Linda Morrison reporting suspicious activity at 847 Ranch Road. Large numbers of people are using unpermitted recreational facilities. This could be an unlicensed business operation. The ninth and final call was pure desperation. 911, what's your emergency? Linda Morrison, 847 Ranch Road. The property owner is completely uncooperative with community safety officials. I believe this illegal facility may be connected to other criminal activities. By the time the third police car arrived at my property, I was sitting on my porch watching this absurd drama unfold while Linda paced around my pond like she was gathering evidence for a murder trial. Officer Martinez, who seemed to be the senior officer, approached me with the expression of someone who dealt with difficult neighbors before. Sir, we've received multiple calls about some kind of dispute over a swimming pool? I gestured toward my pond. Officer, that's a cattle pond that's been here since the 1960s. This woman showed up this morning claiming it's an illegal swimming pool and demanding I tear it down. Officer Martinez looked at the pond, then at Linda, then back at me. Sir, that's clearly a farm pond. Is there some kind of HOA dispute happening here? I'm not even part of any HOA, I said. My property predates this neighborhood by decades. That's when Linda rushed over, waving her folder of documents like evidence in a courtroom drama. Officer, this man is operating an unpermitted recreational facility in violation of multiple safety codes and community standards. I have documented evidence of environmental contamination, safety violations, and zoning infractions. Officer Martinez examined her evidence with the patience of someone accustomed to dealing with neighborhood drama. After several minutes, he handed the folder back to Linda. Ma'am, these appear to be printouts from the internet and some kind of amateur water testing. This isn't evidence of any crime. But the pH levels. Linda protested. The chemical composition. The lack of safety barriers. Ma'am, Officer Martinez said calmly, that's a farm pond on private property. The owner has every right to maintain livestock water sources however he sees fit. Linda's face turned red. This is not a livestock pond. Look at the construction. Look at the clear water. Look at the decorative rocks around the edges. Officer Martinez looked where she was pointing, then turned back to me. Sir, do you actually use this pond for livestock? Not currently, I admitted. I don't have cattle right now, but my grandfather built it for that purpose. I've just been maintaining it as a water feature. That admission was all Linda needed. She practically shouted with triumph. See, he just admitted it's a decorative water feature. that makes it a recreational facility subject to HOA regulations and safety codes. Officer Martinez rubbed his forehead like he was developing a headache. Ma'am, decorative water features on private property are not illegal. Property owners can have ponds, fountains, swimming pools, or any other water feature they want on their own land. But the permits? Linda insisted. The environmental impact studies. The safety inspections. Ma'am, those requirements only apply to commercial operations or major construction projects. A property owner can dig a pond in his backyard without asking anyone's permission. Officer Martinez turned to his colleagues and suggested they wrap up this call, but Linda wasn't finished. Officer, I demand that you cite this man for operating an unpermitted facility. I demand that you require him to produce documentation proving this structure was legally constructed. I demand that you enforce community safety standards. Ma'am, Officer Martinez said with strained patience, we don't enforce HOA rules. That's a civil matter between neighbors. If you have property disputes, you need to work them out through proper legal channels. After the police left, Linda stood in my driveway for another 20 minutes, making phone calls and taking more photos. I could hear her scheduling appointments with lawyers, environmental inspectors, and anyone else she thought might support her case against my pond. Finally, she approached me one more time before leaving. Mr. Williams, this isn't over. I have connections with regulatory agencies that might surprise you. That illegal facility is going to be removed one way or another. She drove away, but I had the distinct feeling this was just the beginning of something much more complicated than a neighborhood dispute. What I didn't know was that Linda's obsession with my pond was about to trigger a chain of events that would expose secrets that had been buried on my property for decades. The next morning, I woke up to find two men in dark suits standing by my pond, taking measurements with professional-looking equipment. Unlike Linda's theatrical approach, these guys were quiet, methodical, and honestly a little intimidating. When I approached them, they introduced themselves as Agent Collins and Agent Martinez from some kind of federal environmental compliance office. They showed me credentials that looked legitimate, but something about their presence felt off. Mr. Williams, Agent Collins said, we've received reports about potential environmental violations at this location. We're here to conduct a preliminary assessment. What kind of environmental violations? I asked. Agent Martinez consulted a tablet filled with technical data. Allegations of improper waste disposal, groundwater contamination, and unlicensed operation of recreational facilities. These weren't random government inspectors. Someone had sent them specifically to investigate my property, and I was starting to suspect that Linda had connections she hadn't mentioned. We'll need to take water samples and conduct a geological survey, Agent Collins explained. The process should take several hours. As they worked, I noticed they were paying special attention to areas around the pond that seemed oddly specific. They took soil samples from exact locations and measured distances with military precision. That afternoon, Agent Collins approached me with results that didn't make sense. Mr. Williams, our analysis has revealed some unusual readings in this area. The electromagnetic signatures and ground density measurements suggest there may be structures beneath this pond that weren't disclosed in your property records. What kind of structures? That's what we need to determine. We'll be recommending a more comprehensive investigation involving specialized equipment. After they left, I found myself staring at my pond with new questions. I'd inherited this property from my grandfather 5 years ago, but I'd never really explored the land beyond basic maintenance. Grandpa had always been secretive about his military service, deflecting questions with jokes about classified fishing spots and top-secret swimming holes. Maybe it was time I understood what I'd actually inherited. The old barn behind the house had always been off-limits during my childhood visits. Grandpa claimed it was full of dangerous farm equipment and old chemicals, nothing a kid should be messing around with. But Grandpa had been gone for 5 years now, and I was starting to think there were things about this property I needed to understand. The barn was secured with a heavy-duty padlock that looked more military than agricultural. It took me an hour with bolt cutters to break it open, and what I found inside definitely wasn't farming equipment. The barn was essentially a disguised entrance to a concrete stairway leading down into what appeared to be a proper underground facility. The walls were lined with conduit-carrying cables that looked far too sophisticated for rural internet, and there were ventilation systems designed for something more substantial than storage. Emergency lighting flickered on automatically as I descended, revealing a corridor that extended further than my flashlight beam could reach. This wasn't some basement or storm shelter. This was professional construction built to government specifications. The main room was filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a Cold War movie. Banks of communication equipment lined the walls, most of it outdated but some pieces that looked surprisingly modern. There were multiple radio systems, satellite uplink equipment, and monitoring stations displaying data on green phosphor screens. A logbook on the main desk had entries dating back to the 1980s, with the most recent entry from just 6 months before Grandpa's death. The handwriting was his, but the content was coded references to perimeter monitoring and signal verification that made no sense for a retired farmer. What got my attention was a computer terminal in the corner that was still actively running. The screen showed a basic interface with options for communication logs, security status, and emergency protocols. When I touched the keyboard, the system immediately prompted for identification. But there was also an option labeled Facility Orientation New Personnel. Curiosity got the better of me and I clicked on it. "Welcome to Listening Post Delta 7, said a voice through speakers I hadn't noticed. This facility serves as a remote monitoring station for regional communication surveillance and early warning systems. All personnel are reminded that this location maintains active security protocols and that unauthorized disclosure of facility operations is a federal offense." The automated message continued with technical specifications that painted a picture of a sophisticated intelligence-gathering operation that had been running out of my grandfather's property for decades. As the tour continued, I realized that Linda's environmental investigators had been looking for exactly this kind of installation. The electromagnetic readings, the ground density measurements, the specific soil samples, they had known what they were looking for. But the most disturbing part of the recorded message was the ending. "This facility maintains automated security protocols. Unauthorized access or suspicious activity in the vicinity will trigger notification to designated military contacts. Please stand by for contact verification." Before I could figure out how to cancel whatever I just initiated, a new message appeared on the screen: "Unauthorized access detected. Notifying designated contacts. Please stand by." A countdown timer appeared, starting at 60 seconds and ticking down steadily. I had no idea what was going to happen when it reached 0, but something told me I was about to find out just how serious Grandpa's secrets were. The countdown reached 0 at exactly 2:47 p.m., and for several minutes nothing happened. I convinced myself that maybe the system was just old and broken like everything else Grandpa had left behind. That delusion lasted until Colonel James Patterson knocked on my door at 6 p.m. Colonel Patterson was in his 60s, wearing civilian clothes but carrying himself with unmistakable military bearing. He introduced himself as a former colleague of my grandfather and someone who needed to discuss what I'd discovered that afternoon. "Your grandfather called me 2 weeks before he died," Colonel Patterson said, settling into Grandpa's favorite chair like he'd been there before. "He told me he was worried about some woman asking too many questions about the property. Looks like his concerns were justified." He pulled out his phone and showed me surveillance photos of Linda meeting with the fake federal agents, taken from angles that suggested military-grade monitoring equipment. "Son," he said, "that pond of yours isn't just a pond, and those government inspectors your neighbor brought in aren't really government inspectors. Your grandfather was protecting something a lot more important than you realize." Colonel Patterson explained that my grandfather had been far more than a simple farmer. Thomas Williams was one of the most trusted intelligence operatives in his unit, recruited specifically because his agricultural background provided perfect cover for a rural monitoring station. When the Cold War officially ended, someone still needed to maintain the communication networks we'd built and monitor for new threats, the colonel explained. "Your grandfather volunteered to stay behind and keep the facility operational. The installation under my pond had been active for 40 years, disguised as a farm operation while serving as a critical listening post for monitoring communications across 3 states. The equipment down there isn't just playing old recordings," Patterson continued. "It's still intercepting and analyzing communication patterns, looking for threats that most people don't even know exist." But the most shocking revelation was about Linda and her fake federal agents. "Your neighbor Mrs. Morrison isn't just some HOA busybody," he said, showing me a thick file containing surveillance photos and background reports. "She's working for a private intelligence firm called Meridian Solutions that specializes in locating and accessing abandoned government installations." The photos showed Linda in meetings with people I didn't recognize, exchanging documents and equipment in parking lots around town. "Meridian has been contracted by foreign intelligence services to identify and access Cold War-era facilities like yours," Patterson explained. "They've been using property disputes and environmental concerns as cover for reconnaissance operations. Linda had been hired specifically to find a way onto my property. The pond dispute, the HOA violations, the fake government inspectors, all of it was theater designed to create legal justification for accessing my land. The real federal agents will be here tomorrow, Patterson said. We've been building a case against Meridian for months, waiting for them to make an overt move. Your neighbor's obsession with your pond just gave us the evidence we needed. That night, I sat by my pond understanding for the first time why Grandpa had been so protective of this place. It wasn't just a farm or a home, it was a critical piece of national security infrastructure that he had spent decades protecting. The next morning brought a convoy of black SUVs and the kind of federal response that made Linda's fake investigation look like amateur theater. Agent Sarah Kim from the FBI introduced herself as the lead investigator in what she called Operation Listening Post, a multi-agency effort to protect classified installations from foreign intelligence operations. Mr. Williams, she said, we've been monitoring Meridian Solutions and their attempts to access facilities like yours for over a year. Your neighbor Mrs. Morrison has been serving as an unwitting asset in their operation. Linda had no idea that her employers were foreign intelligence contractors. She genuinely believed she was working for a legitimate environmental consulting firm contracted to resolve property disputes. Yesterday's fake inspection was the evidence we needed to move forward with arrests, Agent Kim explained. Meridian's operatives are being taken into custody as we speak. But Linda's fate would depend on her willingness to cooperate with the federal investigation. Within hours, my property was swarming with FBI technical teams documenting the Listening Post facility and federal prosecutors building cases against the Meridian operatives who had infiltrated my property. Linda arrived that afternoon in a state of complete panic, demanding to know why federal agents were arresting the people she had been working with. Mr. Williams, she said, I need you to understand that I never intended for any of this to happen. The people who hired me told me this was a legitimate environmental assessment project. Agent Kim allowed me to participate in Linda's debriefing, where the full scope of her manipulation became clear. Meridian had specifically targeted Linda because of her financial desperation and her legitimate background in environmental consulting. She had lost her previous job after a failed project that cost her firm millions, and she was facing bankruptcy when Meridian approached her with what seemed like a career-saving opportunity. They told me you were operating an illegal recreational facility that was affecting groundwater quality, Linda explained. They said I would be helping protect the community while earning enough money to rebuild my career. The company had provided her with sophisticated testing equipment, fake credentials for Dr. Foster, and detailed intelligence about my property that could only have come from foreign surveillance operations. I started suspecting something was wrong when they kept asking questions that didn't relate to environmental concerns, Linda admitted. They wanted to know about underground structures, electrical systems, and communication equipment. That's not typical for water quality assessments. Her growing suspicions had actually helped the FBI case. Linda had secretly recorded several conversations with her Meridian handlers where they discussed accessing classified materials and government installations. Agent Kim offered Linda a choice: face prosecution as a co-conspirator in the espionage operation, or cooperate fully with the federal investigation in exchange for immunity. Linda chose cooperation, providing evidence that helped the FBI arrest the entire Meridian network and identify their foreign intelligence connections. The resolution came faster than anyone expected. Within a week, the Meridian operatives were facing federal espionage charges, their foreign contacts were being expelled from the country, and Linda was beginning the process of rebuilding her life with FBI protection. But the most unexpected development was the government's offer to me. Colonel Patterson returned with an official delegation from the Department of Defense, bearing a proposal that would transform my inheritance from a burden into an opportunity. Mr. Williams, the United States government would like to offer you a contract to maintain this facility as a training center for current intelligence operations, the colonel announced. The offer was generous beyond anything I could have imagined. The government would provide funding for property improvements, a substantial salary for facility management, and security clearance that would allow me to understand exactly what I was helping to protect. Your grandfather served his country for 40 years, Patterson said. Now you have the opportunity to continue that service while building something that benefits your entire community. Linda's redemption took a different but equally satisfying path. The media attention from the espionage case attracted legitimate environmental consulting firms who were impressed by her investigative work and her courage in exposing the Meridian operation. 3 different companies have offered me positions based on the FBI's testimony about my role in uncovering this conspiracy, she told me. My ability to identify and investigate complex property fraud has become a valuable skill. Her new career focused on helping property owners protect themselves against exploitation by unscrupulous developers and foreign investment schemes. I spent so much time learning to manipulate environmental law for Meridian's benefit, she said, that I became an expert in recognizing when others are using the same tactics against vulnerable landowners. The community transformation exceeded everyone's expectations. The government contract brought federal funding, security jobs, and recognition to an area that had been struggling economically for years. My pond remained exactly where it had always been, but now it was officially designated as part of a training facility for intelligence operations. The same water that Linda had tested for illegal chemicals was now being used to train the next generation of people protecting national security. Colonel Patterson decided to stay in the area as the facility's security coordinator, finally able to talk openly about the decades he had spent protecting installations like mine. 40 years of keeping secrets, he said during the facility's dedication ceremony, and now I get to help train people who will continue that mission. It's a better retirement than I ever expected. The most surprising relationship that emerged from this chaos was the friendship between Linda and me. Our shared experience of being manipulated by foreign intelligence operatives had created a bond based on mutual respect and understanding. You could have let them prosecute me along with the real criminals, she pointed out. But you chose to help me find a way out of the mess I had accidentally created. We celebrated the first anniversary of our initial confrontation with a barbecue by the pond, surrounded by friends and colleagues from the training facility. Looking back, I realized that Grandpa's greatest legacy wasn't the classified facility he protected for 4 decades, but the example he set of ordinary people doing extraordinary things when their country needed them. The pond still reflects the sky just like it always did, but now it also reflects a community that understands the value of protecting what matters most. Sometimes the most profound victories emerge from the most unexpected battles. Linda learned that environmental protection and national security can work together when people are willing to ask the right questions and stand up to exploitation. I learned that inheriting responsibility for something important is an honor, not a burden. And somewhere in a federal prison, the Meridian operatives are learning that American property owners are more resourceful than foreign intelligence services give them credit for. The next time someone calls 911 9 times about your pond, you might want to check if there's more to the story than meets the eye. Because sometimes the most ordinary-looking places are protecting the most extraordinary secrets. And sometimes the most annoying neighbors accidentally become the heroes who help protect those secrets from people who would use them to harm our country. If this story taught me anything, it's that we never know what responsibilities we might inherit or what role we might play in something bigger than ourselves. But when the moment comes to stand up for what's right, we have to be ready to do whatever it takes to protect the things that matter most. Whether that's a pond, a community, or the security of our entire nation.